So how long you lived in the United States?
5 months. I'm fresh.
Oh, wow.
Have you spent much time in it?
Yeah, I've been to Australia probably 30 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, quite a bit. And
You like it?
New Zealand. I do. It's really beautiful. I mean, I've been all over, not just Sydney, but the Gold Coast to Perth, to Brisbane, to Melbourne, just all around.
You see, most people in America, they think it's just some little island in the other side of the world.
Oh, it's massive. Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Is there anything you learnt about Australians when you were there?
Oh, each time something different, that you put beetroot on everything.
Yeah.
No, you ruined my burger by putting beetroot on it. But, no, culture, it's a very interesting culture, because there's a lot of sarcasm, a lot of banter. And I think the first time I went, I actually, they were introducing me and they were just cutting me down every second. So I came up there and just tore them to shreds. And next thing I knew, we were all great friends.
Yeah, the talking down actually means that they care about you.
Yeah. You do have a hatred for greatness and a secret admiration for it.
What do you mean secret admiration? Because I feel the hatred.
You want to be great, right?
Yeah.
That's the secret.
So you want to be great, but then you don't want people doing better than you.
Yeah. And so it's two things. You hate it in other people because you're taught to, and you hate it in yourself because you feel obligated to, but you want it desperately. So you live in this tension of, I really believe I am great. I can't let anybody know I believe that. I have to achieve greatness by looking like I never tried to get it.
I don't think it's supported though as well. Like I feel
it's not. No one will support you in that except when you're failing.
Yeah, because then that's proving that you're not better than them.
That's right. Yeah.
I wonder what it is, because honestly, the biggest reason I moved away from there is obviously wanting to progress and being in proximity to the people that are doing cool things and in the space that I'm in. But equally, it was just this nature of, I want someone to be able to fist bump me when I'm saying about my big goal, not laugh at me.
Yeah.
And it was this massive switch where, say, at the start of the year when I wrote down my goals for the year, and one of them was, I want to interview Matthew McConaughey, everyone in Australia would laugh.
Yeah.
But then you come here and they go, oh, how can I help?
Yeah.
And I wonder why. Have you ever thought about why cultures develop that way?
That's what I was. I studied cultures, and I was a social anthropologist. And so I'd travel the world and break down cultures, help people understand how to integrate and effectively reach them.
Do you think that it's fixable, that negative part of a culture?
I'm an optimist, so I think everything's fixable. And but I think every culture has positive things, and what you want to do is accentuate the positive things and grow that larger than negative things. But some things are so entrenched and so ingrained, it's very, very difficult. And Kiwi culture is probably worse than, because Aussies at least inside, and they're deep inside, believe in their greatness. Kiwis want to be depressed. And they if they're happy, they feel like there's something wrong, which is different than an Aussie. Aussie wants to be happy. You can surf and be happy. And you just don't want to be openly aspiring or ambitious. But if you're a Kiwi, even happiness feels wrong. And there's a different cultural personality. So there's a lot of almost disdain for people in New Zealand, and so it's a very, very interesting culture.
Why so? Have you dug deep on that culture?
Yeah, I have, but I could spend hours and hours, and and England too. And I remember when I first went to England, and I got a question in a Q&A. Why does America have better leaders than us? And it was a very honest, poignant, almost painful question. And I said, America doesn't have better leaders than you. You gave us all your best leaders. All the early leaders of the United States, all the ones that we attribute the Constitution to and all the greatness of America, they were all Brits. You had such a low ceiling for greatness and for leadership that they had to come here where there was no ceiling. So if you want to know how great your leaders are, look at Washington, look at Jefferson, and look at Adams. All of them would have been Brits, but in your culture, they would have been less. And so it's not the quality of the talent of the people, it's the culture and the cultural ceiling that's there. England has small moments that allows greatness to emerge. Chamberlain was the prime minister, and he was a terrible leader. But when Hitler almost took over the world, an opening happened where you could actually have, Churchill. But the moment the war was over, Churchill became a terrible leader again. And not because he lost his ability to lead, but because the culture swallowed him up again. And so you look at history and you look for pockets to identify. Transitions are the best time to identify what really is inside of a culture. And so that's kind of fun.
So if the culture is struggling, it's very hard to be a leader regardless. Really, like the culture will really help elevate, or
it will. You have to have people who don't care about being loved. And it's like it's almost like or you could say differently, they're as good being loved as they are being hated. It's an equal fuel for them. And that's what in some ways makes Trump an anomaly. He loves being loved and he loves being hated. He just doesn't like being ignored.
Perhaps Trump has a similar thing to me, which in my 7 frequencies assessment that I did this morning, which I'm going to leave a link for everyone to do below in the show notes. But you have an assessment and it's testing your communication
frequencies.
Frequencies. Yeah. And my number 1 was challenger, number 2 was seer, and number 3 was motivator.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about me just by seeing what my results are?
Well, of course, I can see more than your results. I can see all 7, and I can see the numerical value strength of frequency with each one. So I have a little bit more data. But just given your first frequency as a challenger, by the way, that's my daughter's number 1 frequency. And challengers look at people and actually do see greatness in them. They just see such untapped potential. It frustrates them when they look at people and think, why aren't you working harder to be greater? Why aren't you sacrificing more to be extraordinary? And so challengers tend to call people out and call them up. And they're very resistant in terms of when they're being challenged back and when they're being pressed back. And so for a challenger, their first thought is no. And when someone gives them any input or speaks anything into their life, but they expect to be heard. And so there's a force of energy with a challenger. I don't know if that sounds like you.
It's me. It's literally me to a T. As you're explaining this, I struggle to hang out with people and even just go on a run with someone that isn't pushing themselves a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
perhaps like you can just see there's so much more. Maybe they don't have much passion in their voice.
Yeah.
When I ask them what they do, they just explain the most boring thing. And it's not boring because of the task. It's boring because of the way they're saying it. You can tell they are very bored. And it just kind of grinds my gears a little bit. I just
Mm-hmm.
go like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing any of that? And is that a common trait in someone like
challengers do not want to be around people who are happy with average. And when you're around average people, you feel like you're drowning in mediocrity. And so you won't be able to resist the need to call them out to more. and so you kind of decide who's in your world, because the people who want to be challenged, they're the ones that stay close to you. The people who also want to be great, they're the ones that are good with your challenging frequency. And the flip side of it, of course, is that every frequency has a shadow. And so the shadow of a challenger is a manipulator. And so what a challenger does is they're trying to bring greatness out of you. But a manipulator reverses the intention of that frequency and tries to get the most out of you for themselves personally. And so you want to make sure that you're healthy in your inner world. Because if you're toxic or bitter or driven by fear or even greed, that frequency can flip on you And challengers are powerful, so they can get people to do what they want them to do. You know how to motivate people. You know how to get people to do what you want them to do. The question you have to always ask yourself is, am I getting them to do what I want them to do because it's best for me? Or am I getting them to do what I want them to do because it's best for them? And that's the nuance of the frequency and the shadow of that frequency. It's one of the strongest frequencies. Every football coach or every sports coach who at halftime, they're up, 24-0, and they're still yelling at their team, telling them they almost scored. We should have had 42. That person is a challenger. When you're listening to a coach saying, most people choose to be average, in our environment, we bring the best out of you. And if you don't want the best pulled out of you, get out of our environment. That's a challenger.
Yeah. Do you think the other two frequencies on here, seer and motivator, are heavily linked to people that are challengers as well?
No, they can vary dramatically. But your number differential is your challenger is the strongest. And then there's a significant drop.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge there is that your second frequency is a seer, but you may not use it nearly as much as you should. And that seer is casting vision and painting a picture of the future and inspiring people by the extraordinary thing you're going to create together. And because it's your second frequency, you're assuming you're doing that and that everyone gets it. Everyone gets the vision. I shouldn't have to repeat it again. Everyone knows where we're going. Everybody knows why we're doing this. I shouldn't have to bring that back up. I shouldn't have to paint that picture one more time. And so that challenger can get in the way of your seer. And so, but if you can pull that seer frequency up, you'll remember that most people need as much vision as they need challenge. They need to see what's inspiring you that also inspires them. And then you add the challenge of, this is why we're going to pay the price to this. This is why we're going to sacrifice, because we want to make sure we know what we're actually aspiring to do. This is what we're going to conquer. This is the territory we're going to take. This is the world we're going to create. And then everybody goes, oh yeah. And this is the price that has to be paid. So the challenger can be an incredible compliment to a seer. You just want to make sure you don't leave that seer dormant.
And then the motivator
yeah.
is linked into that too, because would you say, like, when I'm reading this, you transmit energy and infuse self-belief in others. Motivators are positive, encouraging, and enthusiastic supporters of the dreams and goals of others.
Mm-hmm.
By going through pain, challenge, hardship in your life, would a byproduct of that a lot of the time become a motivator because you have overcome that and you are now inspired to help other people do it? So then when you're helping those people in that position, you go, I've been there, and you can kind of relate to them a little bit more. And then maybe this motivator communication frequency will come out.
What's interesting is everything you described is actually a challenger.
It's a challenger. So what about
the motivator is a very different frequency.
Okay.
The motivator frequency is a person who actually just sees all the good in you. They look at you and you're already awesome. They want to build your self-belief that you can do this. And they bring energy to the room. And I don't know if you've ever been in a room, you go, they liked me. That's the motivator. I don't have to change for them. I'm already awesome. That's the motivator. And it's not the person going, we've gone through trauma. So we can take on more trauma. That's the challenger. All right. So don't impugn on the motivator. Challenge your intention.
I get that now. It makes so much sense because you're seeing someone in a place and there's more in them. Of course, that's the challenger.
Yeah. The motivator is the person who believes that if they can get you to believe in yourself, you'll have the internal energy to do the things that you're created to do. But they're not looking at your deficit. They're looking at your assets. And that's a huge difference. And by the way, in the whole personal development world and all the social media world, when you're listening to different speakers, a dominant number of them are challengers. The ones that are telling you, you can do more. There's more you can bring to this moment. You need to bleed, right? And then you have the motivators. People love them because they're like the happy pill. Motivators are the happy pill. The motivator is the moment you're like, I'm depressed. I have no motivation. I hate myself. There's self-loathing going on. And they go, Chris, you're amazing. You've already accomplished so much. You're 23 and you've already changed the world. And you're like, oh yeah.
And a challenger doesn't like those people, I don't think.
Not as much, because you're like, you're lying to me.
Yeah, you're like, shut up.
When a motivator is telling you how awesome you are, your inner voice is going, they're just brown nosing. They're kissing my butt. They're
trying to make me weak.
Yeah. And yet the whole dynamic of it's really important, because your frequency, and by the way, this is not a style. This is an extension of your neurological processing of reality. And so this means that your inner voice sounds like this frequency. So your inner voice is saying, Chris, you're not working hard enough. Chris, why are you settling for less? Chris, when are you going to really suck it up and become great? Even though other people are seeing you great, that little voice inside your head can become ruthless. And then there's another inner voice that says, can't you see how much you could do? That's the seer. Like, you can't even share these dreams. They're so big. People would think you're an arrogant narcissist if you told them what you're seeing in your head. But that voice is saying, but you got it. You can get there. And then you have that little motivator trying to get out of and to be heard inside of your soul saying, hey, Chris, you already have value. And you just need to believe in yourself and know that you matter, that your life has significance. And it's that voice inside of you that sometimes will speak to you when you're just wiped out. When you feel like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get out of bed today? Why can't I pursue this vision that I see? That voice says, it's okay. You've got this. You have all the talent you need. You have all the material you need to live the life you're created to live.
What's a common denominator that makes people progress into challenges? Where does it stem from? Like, what are some of the things that happen in childhood, upbringing, whatever it may be? Does it come from that to develop these frequencies, or are we born with it?
It's interesting, because when we put together this process, obviously we began with research, but no data. Now we've given over 20,000 people the assessment, and we have massive data in just a year, which has been really fascinating. We've learned so much more. This is a very dynamic universe. And at first, I wasn't really, I didn't try to decide whether it was, in a sense, genetic or environmental, right? Because that's always the question. And it's sort of a combination. But what we've seen that seems so clear is that you can identify frequencies in children almost the moment they begin to be verbal. And it's kind of astonishing right away. And because my daughter has a daughter who's 4 years old, we've watched her and the expression of the frequencies. I remember one day, she was only 3. She grabbed my face and said, you can do it, Poppy. You can do it. Like, that motivator frequency just emerged out of her. And whenever she accomplishes the smallest thing, she goes, I did it. I did it. She just naturally self-celebrates. That's not a challenger. A challenger is, all I did was put the square in the square slot, and I should be able to do more. But you can see that motivator frequency, and you can, and other children, you actually can see like a healer frequency. They're 3, 4 years old. They're already so tender. They're already so aware of other people's emotions. They're already trying to create a safe space for their family, even though they're only 3 or 4. So the frequencies emerge very quickly. I do think there's several things. Your shadows can definitely come out of the impact of your environment. If you're raised in a toxic, dark, broken environment, you may only be operating out of your shadows because it was a survival mechanism. And if I could just maybe dive in the shadows just for a second, because when I put together the 7 frequencies, I lead a business mastermind with my son Aaron called The Arena. And on the Arena call, I said, pick a TV show, and I'll break the characters down based on the 7 frequencies. They picked 2 shows, Friends and Succession. I wasn't as interested in Friends, but I really was interested in Succession. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a brilliant show of a billionaire family passing on wealth and power to their children. It's the fight for power in a family. So I watched the pilot of Succession, and I could not find a single one of the 7 frequencies. And I had basically a panic attack going, it doesn't work. The system is broken. And I had this little inner voice tell me, go back and look at the shadows. I watched the first 3 episodes, and all 7 frequencies are there, but only in their shadows. And when I watched every episode of every season, there was virtually never a single healthy frequency expressed. Every season are only shadow frequencies being expressed. So then you have the challenger is the manipulator, and the seer is the perfectionist, and the motivator is the performer, and the healer is the cipher, and the professor is a diminisher, and the commander is a dictator, and the maven is a nihilist. And what really concerned me watching the show is realizing most of the people in this generation have their communication models from shadows and not light. And the problem is the shadows work. See, I wish I could tell you if you operate in your shadows, you're never going to be successful, but that's not true. Mm-hmm. I wish I could tell you if you operate in your shadows, you're never going to become a millionaire or a billionaire, but you're more likely to be honest with you. Because the shadows actually penetrate the soft spots of people. And it allows you to be dangerously powerful in the way you relate to other human beings and the way you can pull things toward yourself. And so the 7 frequencies, in terms of the light of those frequencies, are important because it makes us human, not necessarily just important because they make us successful.
Yeah. So I guess defining the goal, perhaps you can succeed in the thing that you're chasing, but maybe that doesn't lead to a life with more fulfillment, potentially because you're maybe tearing other people down in the process of building yourself up.
Yeah, it's worse. It leaves you empty.
Yeah.
You accomplish everything and have nothing. You're Citizen Kane.
Yeah. See, I wonder if there's something where the shadows serve us at all. Like, is there a period in our journey where using shadow serves us, or is it one of those slippery slopes because the shadow is meaning that you're perhaps hurting someone in the process of doing the thing?
Well, that's a dilemma, is that both the answers are yes. The shadows do serve us. That's why we use them, because humans fight for their survival. So if you're raised in a really toxic environment, if you have maybe even narcissistic parents, if you're raised in an incredibly dysfunctional, toxic, broken world, you may become a performer. In fact, a lot of the great comedians come from really broken, toxic families, and they learned how to perform because it's the only way they could keep people happy. Or you might actually learn how to be a manipulator, because the only way you could get what you need, even just basic survival skills, was to learn how to manipulate other people. And so a lot of times you work from your shadow because it's the only thing that keeps you alive in your mind. And the problem, of course, is it's Machiavellian. Basically, Machiavelli is like telling you the whole world's operating out of the shadows. So you need to operate out of your shadows, because the only way you can win against shadows is shadows. But actually, the one thing that expels darkness is light.
What's the first step to, you recognize that you're running and operating from your shadows, and now we want to try and pivot that to our frequencies? Like, what's the step of going, okay, I'm in my shadow here, I'm manipulative, I need to kind of change this up so I can actually feel a bit more fulfilled and not empty?
Yeah, it's been interesting whenever we've graphed CEOs and people who are highly successful, we've had a very similar reaction. They read the book and would say, I didn't see myself in the frequencies. I only saw myself when I read the chapter on the shadows. And when I read the shadows, I knew this is who I am.
Damn.
And so they're very pragmatic. So they come back to me and say, so give me the tools to get out of my shadow. And I go, well, it's not quite like that, because your shadows are not something you do. They're something you are. And so the only tools to get out of your shadow is to get out of the negative space in your soul. You have to choose forgiveness rather than bitterness. You actually have to choose hope rather than despair. You have to choose love rather than hate. You actually have to make internal choices that change your inner world, because your shadow isn't out there. Your shadow is in here. And then it's a frequency that's emanated from the core you to the world. And so I'm always going to be a manipulator if I'm living in fear. I'm always going to be a performer if I have a deep sense of insignificance and self-doubt and I'm not rooted in my self-worth. I'm always going to be a dictator if I have a need for control and power. And so you have to deal with the internal world. That's what gets you out of your shadow. So if I could just summarize in one word, what gets you out of your shadow is love. When you begin to live a life of love, you begin to naturally move out of your shadow. When you begin loving people and when you love yourself, it moves you out of your shadow. And so that's where I would say everyone needs to begin.
Yeah, one thing I'm just thinking about in my life, as you were explaining earlier on about some of the effects of being a challenger. If someone's not motivated, driven, hungry, progressive, you don't really give them the time of day. You're more selective with the people in your life, which I would say is a benefit to some degree, but I would also say that I think about that aspect of my life a lot. I think about why I struggle to treat everyone with respect. And maybe it's not publicly to them, but internally what I'm thinking. Like perhaps there's certain people that I meet or come across where I just go, like, we're not going to, maybe subconsciously or just internally, I'm like, we're not going to be friends. And so then maybe I don't show up in a way of, oh, like, let's give this person the best chance they have. And let's actually like show them that I respect them and be seen and be curious. Like I am with people that I see value in, quote unquote. Like I feel like I have this thing in my life, which I don't know if it serves me or not, but I have this thing where I'm extremely curious on people that I'm curious on, and then I'm extremely not interested in people that I'm not.
And I think the two things you want to be careful of is making sure that all of your relationships don't fall into these two categories, transactional and utilitarian. Because if all your relationships become transactional and utilitarian, eventually every relationship you have will give up on you. And that is how we end up living alone. That's how we end up finding ourselves alone in life, because we make all relationships transactional and utilitarian. My son Aaron and I, we have a fashion company called Ghost Artifacts, and we have to work with a lot of different players, right? You have people who are working with pattern making, people who are working with sewing, people who are working with fabrics. It's like very complex process. And we were today talking about how some people in a particular part of our process were not executing in a timely manner. They were not hitting deadlines, and it's killing us. And I said to Aaron, but we really like these people. So what we need to do is decide they need to fall into the friend category, but not to the execution category. So we're not going to give up on them because they can't execute at the level that we need. We're just going to finish the project, and then we're going to move them into, we really like them. They're just good friend people, and we'll never have a negative feeling if we don't have an expectation of outcome. And throughout my life, that's kind of what I have to do, because I'm an extremely driven person. I'm, type A plus. And I could easily become a very transactional utilitarian person. But years and years ago, I decided I did not want to do life alone. And I didn't want to build my relationships based on what people could do for me. And so I made a rule in my life of 51%, that I have to at least contribute 51% with every human being in my life. The most they're allowed to contribute is 49%. So that I could never walk away from a relationship going, I used that person, and then I disposed of them. And so if relationships end, I have a really good sense about it, because I go, I invested in that person, and that's okay. If they outgrew me, that's awesome. Because my wife will say to me, people don't stay. People move on. People aren't loyal. And I go, yeah, but they're leaving better. And as long as we can say we invested more than we took, the relationship is healthy for us. And I think that's the goal in life, because there is an aspect of it that people are seasonal for you. But also you will be seasonal for people. And you have to be comfortable with both of those. And then hopefully you'll have a few people in your life that you go, wow, we're going to get to do life together forever.
It's like you're speaking exactly what's going on. And so I'm keen to unpack this a little bit, because perhaps this element of what I was explaining is that I never thought of this way of I'm being transactional.
Mm.
And what you're explaining there, and what I'm just thinking is, when you make a relationship transactional, you remove the person from the person.
Yeah.
And you don't see them as a person like you should. And this person is much more than just one dimensional and one thing.
Yeah.
And perhaps when you make it transactional, you're making this person one dimensional. So you are obsessed with business, type A, really just want to succeed and excel in that. You then go for a dinner with a bunch of friends, and because they're not speaking about business, you think they're lame. And it's like, and you're like, oh, they're not it.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, yes, in order to achieve greatness, a lot of the time we need to be one dimensional, but that doesn't mean we don't relate to these people that we've been friends with for 20 years or 5 years or even 6 months. It's like, no, when you're making it transactional, you're removing the person from the person. What's something that you can say to kind of help me? Because honestly, it's been the biggest challenge in my whole life is keeping friends. And,
but you're only 23.
I'm only 23. And I think, and I do cut myself slack in that aspect where I feel like the life that I am living, really, it's changing so dramatically. And
that's why you haven't been able to keep friends.
Yes.
You have to realize most people are on a very slow trajectory of change. And the dominant number of humans will change very little in their lifetime. You are an anomaly. You are going to change a lot. And you've changed a lot up to 23, and you're going to change probably even more to 33. And so that means that people who relate to you at 23, if they don't keep growing, will not relate to you at 33. I have probably one person that's still a friend from my early 20s. And he moves so slow. And I feel like it's a tortoise and a hare kind of thing. But I had to resolve years and years ago, this guy really is my friend. He really loves me. He cares about me. I just have to stop putting expectations on him that I put on myself. And so I've learned over time to realize that very few people change at the rate that you change or the rate that I change. And even at 67, I'm still a high risk taker. I mean, I'm still starting new companies, new endeavors, risking massive wealth, and most people can't handle that level of pressure on their life. And I don't want to judge people going, oh, they're happy. I remember one time, I maybe shouldn't share this, but my wife and I had this couple we liked, and they were brilliant. He went to Harvard, she went to Duke, so they're, elite. And we were friends for a season, and then they just sort of stopped coming over or stopped seeing us. And Kim and I thought, they're really great people, so we should ask them what we did wrong. And so we called them up, had another dinner, and I said, hey, did we do something like to offend you? We really like you guys. I think you're amazing. And they almost in concert said, no, but whenever we're around you, we feel like we should make our lives more. We feel the pressure to grow and to change and to achieve. And we just don't want that pressure in our life. And I remember saying, oh, I'm good with that. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm good with you choosing a slower paced life and my life being too intense for you. But I still like you. But I accept that you want people who move in your rhythm. And sometimes you have to accept the fact that the faster you move, the fewer people are going to actually stay with you.
They feel not good enough when they hang around you, probably.
No, they felt great about themselves.
But when they hung around you, they didn't, because they're like, oh, and we need more.
Yeah, I need to do more.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not really expecting you to do more. I just thought you were interesting. And you have to realize that a lot of people, it's not even about intelligence. There are people, who whose IQs are off the scale and have gone to, Oxford, but they're more professorial. And so they study, but they don't do. They learn, but they don't grow. And they're experts, but they don't change. And they like people like that. And so some of it is you need to be around high potential, high octane individuals who want to change the world and want to keep growing. And there's a greater possibility in 15 years, you guys are still going to be having conversations.
Yeah. So some of the questions in the assessment were asking about those things around, like, do you think knowledge is power and all this stuff?
Yeah.
Just connecting the dots. If you were to tick all of those boxes, would you be more of a professor potentially, or which communication frequency would you be leaning more towards if you were to be a big believer in just knowledge?
The professor frequency is a knowledge frequency.
Yeah.
And it's a person using a professor frequency when they're always teaching you what they learned. It's all about data. It's about facts. It's about information. And it's that theme of a mind is a terrible thing to waste. So I'm going to put what's inside of my brain inside of your brain. And that's how we're going to relate together as a human being.
Yeah. And I was looking at these questions and all the questions around truth.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I just don't like truth.
It's your lowest frequency.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because for me, I just truly don't believe there's a lot of facts. Like, we can count maybe a lot of them are all interpreted and interpretations in my head. And I look at these things, I see that most facts that people believe are actually just imaginary ceilings they're placing in their life. And this is my thought. So when I was looking
there's a lot of truth to that, but there's also a lot of truth to the fact that I think it's your seventh frequency, if I remember correctly. And I just glanced at it right before we came on. And so that means there's a lot of facts that you might miss that are readily available to you.
Yeah.
And so you might be good to have people on your team to go, your job is to make sure I'm getting the information I might not look at. And I may discount it. It's not on you for me to accept it. It's just on you for you to put it in front of me. And by the way, I totally get where you're coming from. I was speaking at this event. It was it had an interesting name. It was called the 100 Million Mastermind. Everyone in the mastermind had to make minimally $100 million a year in their company, and they paid $100,000 just to be in the group. And so I was one of the regular, speakers at the event, and usually speak twice every few months. And but one of the guys who was there, he told us he had the highest IQ in the world. He's from Scotland, and they made a TV show called Scorpion around him. He broke into the NSA or something like that through his computer, and at 14 or something like that, and got arrested. And crazy story, right? And he has a huge company, but so he has the highest IQ in the world. And I spoke, and I guess they told him, hey, you and Erwin need to have a conversation. So I'm sitting at lunch, and he sits next to me, and he says, I'm told that a conversation between us is inevitable. And it felt really ominous. And I said, wow, I am inevitable. That's kind of awesome. And he said two things really interesting. He said, I listened to your talk, and I disagreed with half of everything you said. I said, oh, well, thank you. And he said, yeah, the facts do not support you. And all I have to do is show you the facts and show you that you're wrong. And I said, this is great. Let's just, I kept listening. And so I had to speak again. Imagine having to speak again right after that with him sitting right in front of you. So I got up there and I thought, I might as well just start here. So I said, Walter and I had lunch. And as you know, Walter has the highest IQ in the world. And so we both are holding up the two ends on the IQ spectrum. and I said, and Walter said he disagreed with half of everything I said, which means the smartest man in the world agreed with half of everything I said. So I'm making huge progress. But then I said, but Walter, you also said that the facts were against me. And I said, you're absolutely right. I said, the facts are always against me because the facts are always against the future, and they're always for the past. So Walter, the facts may be on your side, but the future is on mine. And I think that's a part of the dynamic of it, is that there are facts I need to know, but the facts do not reveal the future. They can conceal it.
That's profound. When you're operating in too much facts, you take away all the magic of life as well, because there's no creation. There's this creation element that goes away when you're just too facts driven.
If you know all the facts, you know everything that can be known, not everything that will be known.
Mm. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, he called me at home. He got my number. It made me nervous. And because his company also like eliminates people around the world. And he solves problems. That's what he told me. He goes, I solve problems.
That's why he uses facts.
Yeah. And so he calls me at home and he's very upset. He goes, hey, I just heard your talk on 7 frequencies of communication, because I did the day before at the event. And he goes, and I really disagree with you. And I said, okay, Walter, tell me what. He said, you said the professor frequency is only and all about data. Because I said, professor frequencies are data driven. And I said, I did say that. He goes, and I thought he was going to disagree with me. He said, what else is there? He said, what are the other frequencies driven by? All the frequencies have to be driven by data. And I thought this was the perfect example of exactly what I was saying. This frequency isn't just the style. It is the neurological process through which you see reality. And that's why you communicate this way. And I said, well, there are other frequencies, Walter, like, and he goes, like, or other ways of knowing, I said, besides facts. He goes, like what? I said, like love? He goes, no, love's just data. And later he came up with an entire construct on happiness and how to become happy through data-driven processes, which, by the way, is exactly what another of my friends did, who teaches happiness at Harvard University, who's also a professor of frequency. And when I was doing a Q&A with him, and someone asked, what do you deal with human emotions? He said, you need to remember all emotions are simply data.
Yeah. Elliot behind the screen talks, he says things every now and then around like, let's try and like come up with a formula to find our dream partner and all this stuff. And I just don't resonate with that approach a lot. I just think that there's this element of like beauty in not knowing and not having this exact thing.
That's your seer frequency.
Yeah.
Because imagine if you came to the conclusion that everything that can be known has been known, I don't think you could wake up in the morning and have a reason to live.
Yes, the uncertainty is the thing.
It's the wonder.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why things that are more uncertain are typically more valuable when you achieve them, because you didn't really know how or when or what that was going to look like.
Right. And by the way, it's one of the reasons I find atheism to be very mundane. Because when you're an atheist, you're saying that something cannot exist outside of your ability to know it. And that is one of the most limiting constructs that a human being could ever take on.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Because do you think it's quite a closed-minded approach too? Because you're closing off any opportunity for anything else?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, maybe I'm so open-minded that, I need to have some closure. But when people ask me, do I think this can exist? I go, I think anything can exist. Like, I don't think even my ability to perceive it or to conceptualize it or to contemplate it is a limitation. Like, just because I can't imagine doesn't mean it can't exist. And so I was at this event called Renaissance. It's like the TED conference. I used to go to TED for like 20 years, and this was more in Carmel. It was all these intellectuals and researchers and scientists. But I was kind of happy to go with my wife because I thought no one would know me, and I could have like this wonderful 3 days of just exploring information about reality. And the moment I get there, I'm in line to get coffee, and some guy identifies me and says, "Hey, you're McManus and you believe in God, right?" And I'm like, honestly, I didn't want to have that conversation. I was just like, I'm just here to get coffee. I'm just here to learn about the universe and science and botany and, have a great time. And I said, yeah. And he goes, so I got a question for you. Do you really believe that the sun stood still? And because in the Bible, it has a story about the sun standing still. And the moment he said that, all these other people go, wait, don't answer the question. We want to grab our coffee and hear. So next thing I know, I got a little crowd of all these elitist intellectuals, wanting to know if I am so dumb and so dull that I believe that the sun stood still. And he goes, okay, now answer it. Do you really believe the sun stood still? And I said, well, I hope you know that the sun does stand still. That it's actually the earth that's moving around the sun. And it was a great first moment. And they said, yeah, but do you believe in these miracles in the Bible? And I remember saying to him, I said, I believe that what is outside of my realm of possibility can exist. I do not believe my intellectual capacity is the measure of all reality. So I actually think my posture should be your posture. What I don't know, I have to be open to.
Yeah. And I guess if someone's sharing something, that means that is their reality, because that's what they feel, that's what they believe. And so you shutting that down, just literally by virtue of you shutting that down, is a pretty ridiculous concept, because if they're saying it, they're feeling it, and that's their reality. One thing that you're talking about, these frequencies and how it flows through everything in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I shared it the other day on a podcast, but I did this, I went to this retreat, and it was called Vision Quests and finding out what your thing is. And one of the exercises, we had to do this big 120-page booklet, and there was meditation all day and all this different thing. One of them was coming up with a purpose statement, but it was really refined. It was only 5 words, and it's I am a, and then 2 words. And we had all this process we had to go through. And the final one that I landed on was I am a curious educator. And I was I liked it, but I wasn't quite sold on it. So then what I did was I started expanding on the words. So I started writing the curious and the educator, and then I put a bubble on each, and then I expanded out what I'm curious about, and then I expanded from there. And then in the educate pillar, I expanded what I like to educate, what areas I do, and all of this. And then we got to the end of the exercise, and the main guy, Rick, told everyone to go around and share their purpose statement. And then it comes to me, and I hold up this page and I go, so I'm a curious educator. So this is what I'm really curious at, and this is what I really love to educate in. And then Rick goes, do you realize what you just did? He's like, you were curious, so you unpacked all of these things. And then when it came to your turn, you decided to educate what you learned about yourself to everyone in the room right now. And I just went, it's funny how we actually operate in this way. And when we go through these certain processes, of unpacking these things, the way we unpack it is literally the answer we're going to get. It's by unpacking that I'm a curious educator, I was being curious and educating in the process. And it's funny. I wonder how many things in our life we're just we're doing, and then moments like that happen where I go, oh, I'm actually operating in this frequency with everything that I'm doing. When I'm young and I'm teaching my dad how to fish, when I'm learning a new way of fishing from someone that's better than me. And I wonder how far back all of these things go. And I guess what you're explaining as well is you can notice when kids are just born and very in their infancies that these things can happen.
Yeah, it's kind of I think a really beautiful thing, because whenever you have more of something in a culture, the more language you have to describe it. And so the Inuit Eskimos have over 30 different words for snow. But where I'm from in El Salvador, we had one word for snow, nieve. And the same word we use for ice cream, because you could double up on cold things, because we didn't have cold things. And I think Indonesia, there are 20, 30, 40 different ways to say green, because it's so lush and green. So the more you have of something, the more language you have. When I was growing up, If a person was psychologically broken, you would just say they're crazy, they're insane, they're mad. And that was pretty much it. Now we use language of bipolar, schizophrenic, manic depressive, ADHD, ADD. We have an endless language because we have more mental illness or mental awareness than we had then. And ironically, with communication, we've not treated communication as one of the central connecting points for humans. Because the reason I wrote the book wasn't so that you could communicate better, but so you could connect better. Because what humans long for is connection. But you cannot have deep human connection without communication. But what we assume, because we say, let's communicate, right? That means that you communicate exactly the same way I do. We use the exact same language. But those are all false assumptions. And maybe it's because I speak multiple languages. Spanish was my first language, and I learned English later. And I've studied so many languages that I realize every language has nuances. It's not just that there are linguistic differences. Inside of those languages, there are different realities that exist. Like in English, you say, I broke this. But in Spanish, you say, se quebró, which means it broke. We take no personal responsibility. And so you can actually see in the culture, there's a lower likelihood that we'll take personal responsibility for something that goes wrong. But in English, you take high responsibility. It's hidden in the language. It's the same way with frequencies. My wife's number one frequency is commander. I've been married 42 years. And let me tell you, that would have been an easy crisis for us if I had not learned that my wife communicates from a frequency that's very different than mine. And so every night before I go to bed, I say, I love you, honey. And then Kim says, lock the doors and turn off the lights. She gives me 2 commands every night. And sometimes, when I'm in a kind of a spicy mood, I'll say, oh, thank you so much. I was going to leave them unlocked and leave all the lights on. And this is like so insightful. Thank you.
And it's just like, no more of that.
Yeah. But most of the time, I just go, yes, honey. I'll lock the doors and turn off the lights. And what she's actually communicating to me is, I need you to keep me safe. And I need you to be responsible for our resources. And then sometimes when she asks me, I realize that she's saying, I just need to know you're here for me. But because her frequency is commander frequency, everything comes as a to-do. And I've tried to help my wife change. And one day she just said, I like the way I do this. I said, yeah, but it's very utilitarian. Every moment you're telling me what to do. She goes, it's very clear. But if I use commander with her, it wouldn't go well. And so I have to learn not only how she communicates, but how she hears. My son's primary frequency is also commander. So I have a wife and a son, and I'm surrounded with commanders. But Aaron, he communicates with command, but he loves hearing from command. It drives him crazy that I'm so elusive and so obscure. And you go, Dad, you when you communicate, it's like a vapor. You've given us this brilliant idea and we have no idea what to do. We just want you to tell us what to do. And so he's a commander who likes a commander frequency. My wife's a commander who doesn't like a commander frequency. So you have to learn. Imagine if you're paying attention to your team and go, all right, I'm a challenger. That's my frequency. So I need to let my team know sometimes I'm not mad at them. I'm actually just challenging us because that's the way I challenge. That's the way I communicate. Sometimes I'm actually really happy with what you've done and I'm really proud of you, but I think that's obvious. So I don't want to go back and reflect on that. I just want to bring the next thing. But also you might have someone on your team who's a healer. And so every time you command, they're wounded. Or you might have someone on your team that is a motivator. And they're like, I just wish she would just tell me I'm awesome a few times, right? And so you have to learn how to communicate with your team. Imagine if I don't know how big your team is, but, imagine if you knew the frequencies of all your team. And as a leader, you said, it's not just their job to hear me at my frequency. It's my job to be able to speak to them in their frequency.
Yeah. So understanding them. I mean, in some sales training I did back in the day, talking about communication styles of the quadrant, the dominant, influence. What are the other two?
Steadiness and compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and disc
Yeah.
disc
Yeah.
profiling. Yeah. I remember going through those, but this is kind of like the next step further of it's like that on steroids. You're one I think I read in the book. Is it Paven?
I'm a Maven. Yeah.
Maven. And there's something unique about that one specifically.
Well, I wish they were all proportional, but they're not.
Yeah.
There are more of one than there are of others. And so there are more challengers and motivators and healers than there are commanders and seers. And so, it has a diminishing effect in some ways because the more dominant ones impact more people. So as a challenger, you're going to impact a lot of people. When you're a motivator, you're going to impact a lot of people. When you're a seer, you're very rare because a seer frequency is more rare and then a motivator frequency. The Maven frequency is an interesting frequency because it's the most rare and probably has the least large impact. And I've always thought about it, and, I'm a person of faith. I came into a relationship with Jesus in college, and I've always thought to myself, if I did not become a person of faith, I don't know if I would have engaged humanity. I think I would have engaged ideas. I was a philosopher, and I love the world of ideas. I love the world of invention. And I spent my life studying people like Leonardo da Vinci and trying to understand the complexities of what makes us human. And only really the shift in my life of connecting to God made me prioritize humanity as my focus of trying to serve the world. And so as a Maven, I see the world very, very differently, and my frequency is very hard to understand. I've had to work really, really hard to be understood. And sometimes, my kids are great. They still work with me. My son works with me in the business world. My daughter works with me in the church faith world. And they'll come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, that talk was so extraordinary. No one knows what you said." And I don't know. And that's the part that matters the most to me. The part that no one knows what I said, that's the part that means the most to me. And so I think this past week, I've done talks on fractals. Like usually you don't hear on Sunday someone explaining how fractals affect your own spiritual dynamic. I've done talks on black holes and quantum mechanics and quantum physics and integrating all these sciences into our own humanity and spiritual journey. And that's a part of being a Maven is, Mavens see the world from outside of the box. And they don't try to look at the world differently. They don't know how to see the world the same. And it was really challenging. And that's why I think by the time I was 10 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair and I was in and out of a hospital. And my mom didn't know what to do with me. And a lot of it was because I felt like I didn't belong in this world. And I couldn't find anyone who understood me, and I couldn't understand people very well. It took me a lot of work to connect myself to people at a deep level. And and I cannot tell you, it's funny. My wife, she's a very staunch Christian in the almost in the classic way, right? And I've shared ideas with her, and she'll say, "You are going to hell." She'll literally look at me and then say, "You're just going to hell." And I go, "How is having an idea like a violation of eternity?" Right? And I'll tell her things, and she go, "Please don't tell anyone. Please never share that thought with the world." And I usually hold it back, and then I do share it with the world. And so that's a part of it. And I've come to realize my greatest impact, which is why I do a lot of high level coaching. My primary role in life, I think, is to affect the best thinkers, leaders, and performers in the world. I do better with them because they're in that top 1%. They're willing to make the hard choices to be great. I'm not as good with average. I'm just really bad with that, because average just needs to be told what to do. You don't have to work that hard to be average. You just be average. All right. And everything that takes an elevation takes a different level of thinking. And so but the downside of a Maven is that they become a nihilist. So every movie that the world ends badly, that's probably a maven writing it. That's in their shadow. Like it's like end of the world. We're eaten by a virus. We're just we're eaten up by humans who it's like the Walking Dead kind of thing. And the world, it's post-apocalyptic. It's Blade Runner. It's funny how no one ever imagines the future as better. Everyone imagines the future as coming to a bleak end. And that's a bunch of mavens writing out of their shadows saying there's no hope for the world. There's no hope for humanity.
I feel like you're such a big optimist, though. And
I am.
So how does that combat with your maven frequency?
Well, when I was in a psychiatric chair and in a hospital, I wasn't an optimist. I could not see a future. I couldn't find meaning in life. I would be in a fetal position at the age of 9 in angst over whether life was meaningless and whether our significance actually mattered and whether we were a speck of dust in the backdrop of the universe. And, how do you deal with a 9-year-old that is in an existential crisis? And it got so bad that I would run away. It's either sleepwalk in El Salvador or run away. And I would go out to fields and I convinced myself I was from another world and that I was a social experiment, that they'd put me and maybe some other people on this planet to see if we could integrate with humans. And I would scream at night, "This isn't working. Please take me home. I don't want to be here anymore." And so I would say I was a pretty well-developed nihilist, by the age of 9 or 10. And I had to fight my way out of that despair. And it wasn't an easy thing.
What were the feelings you were feeling back then? Do you have any vivid memories from 10 years old in that psychiatric chair? Is that what you say?
Oh, yeah, quite a few. I mean, I was a straight D student, and I started living in an internal world and would stop coming out. And so I remember being in school where I would become aware, and all of a sudden the whole class was gone. The teacher just gave up trying to bring me back, and they would just leave and go to recess or wherever they went. And every year I would tell myself, this year I'm going to pay attention. Like this year I'm going to make A's. This year I'm going to be a good student. And within a few weeks, I wouldn't even remember where my classes are. I wouldn't even remember where I put my books. I was having a hard time rooting myself in reality because I lived in an imaginary world. And, and I don't really always talk that deeply about this, but I had created a complete internal world where I knew people in that world. And so when I would come back to this reality, I missed those people. And I felt like I belonged there and not here. And so I was probably as close to a psychotic break as a human being could be. And if anyone's maybe listening and they feel like they have those kind of internal struggles, I did 2 things that I think saved my life. One was before I had any awareness really of like God or anything like that. I told myself to look at beauty. And so probably around the age of 10 or 11, I started paying attention to beautiful things. And I became an aesthetic, and probably turned me into an artist. That's why I design clothes and love creating art. And so I just started looking at beautiful things, flowers, trees, grass, buildings, sunrises, sunsets, to the point where I became so much of an aesthetic, my family would make fun of me. Once I got married and had kids, one day we were doing a mountain climb. They were way ahead of me. And I turned the corner going up this ridge, and I saw these rocks, and I saw this one flower coming out of the ridge. I said, everyone, come back. I want you to see something. And they all started laughing. They made a bet that I would see that flower and make them all come back and see it. And it's because I just developed this keen awareness of beauty and wonder all around me. And then when my kids were little, I would just, we'd pull the car over when we saw a field, and we'd go and run through the fields and eat the flowers. And I just wanted to teach them that there was beauty and wonder all around them. And that, it saved me. In a very real way, beauty saved my life. Because then I realized, oh my goodness, it was always there. Like the beautiful was always around me. It was resplendent. It was overwhelming. And so, yeah, I'm an optimist now because it's like, I know that beauty, wonder, awe is everywhere to be seen if I just open my eyes. So yeah, I'm a ridiculously optimistic human being. And I don't even have to work at it now. It's weird. Optimism is just the essence of my being. And my wife will get really frustrated. She's more pessimistic. And I'll say, honey, could you just stop being pessimistic? And 40 years of marriage, she'll say, no, I like being a pessimist. You need to stop being so optimistic. It's driving me crazy.
Do you think that the feeling you had at 10 is a nature or a nurture thing that's led you to that position?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
We're all raised by imperfect humans. So you really can't blame it on the humans that came before us. Yeah. It's like no one had perfect parents, right? But I did have some trauma. When my mom was pregnant with me, she was only 19 years old. She already had my brother. And my father, best I can understand, threw her down a flight of stairs trying to cause an abortion and broke her leg. And when my mom gave birth to me, she became a Pan Am stewardess and left me, my brother, with our grandparents. So our first few years of our life, we never knew our father. And my mom was traveling in the States as a stewardess. So when she came back and, brought us to the States, it was pretty traumatic. I still remember seeing this person that I only knew through a photograph in my mind. And my grandparents, to me, were my parents. So when they took me away from them, I was losing my parents. And then I don't have a real clear image or memory of my real father. So I had real trauma. That was a part of it. But I was just also different. One thing that really helped me is I gave my mom the 7 frequencies. She's 88 years old. So it's kind of cool giving her the 7 frequencies. And I gave it to my brother, Alex. And my mom and my brother had the exact same top 3 frequencies. And so I realized, she didn't love him more. She just understood him better. And then when I saw their number 7 frequency, they both had the number 7 frequency of my number 1 frequency. And so here I am, this kid that's a maven. I see the world in an unorthodox, unusual way. And then my family is the opposite of the way I communicate, the way I see reality. And so it wasn't that they didn't love me, but they certainly didn't understand me, And it had an effect on so many different fields of my life. And when I took geometry, I never went to class hardly. I skipped school all the time. It's like 50, 60 days. And I took a geometry test and I didn't know that I aced it. I think I got 100 on it, but I thought I failed it, right? That's what I expected. So when I came to class the next time, the professor in front of the whole class accused me of cheating. And I actually said, why would someone cheat to get an F? And he showed me my test. It was on proofs. And I'd never studied proofs, but I realized he had broken the test down into quadrants. And there were like 5 problems in each quadrant. And so what I did is I looked at the problems in each quadrant and realized they're probably all similar. So I answered them as a whole and was able to get all the right answers. And they thought I cheated. So they put me in a portable by myself to take the tests. And so I looked back and I realized that I didn't just have like trauma in my family. I also had a hard time expressing that I was actually good at some things, but I didn't know how I was good at them. But I thought I was bad at everything because of the way people responded to me. So by the time I'm finishing high school, I think, one, I was told I was retarded. So I thought, okay, I'm mentally challenged and I'm not going to accomplish anything in my life. So I didn't go to college right away. I just, lived a meaningless life. And probably my worst day was me sleeping in my car in the winter of North Carolina, wondering, is this what my life is going to be? Yeah.
Do you feel like that gave you the drive to be this type A person? And do you feel like when you first embarked on this journey of betterment and self-improvement and hunger to achieve greatness, maybe it was fueled from some shadow?
Everyone's fueled by shadow. I'm going to say that. Every entrepreneur I know has something that pushes them and something that pulls them. What pushes you is usually the brokenness, and what pulls you is hopefully a wholeness. But I said the first thing that changed me was beauty, but the second thing that really did change me was Jesus. And I think that's actually when I became ambitious. It was, I didn't care about things like heaven. Like that just felt so innocuous or just weird or fluff to me. I wanted to know if humans had a reason to exist. And so for me, having studied every philosophy I could find and reading everything from the Stoics and all the way through modern philosophy, and coming to a conclusion that maybe there is just no truth and no reality, and there's my nihilism, right? And I thought I'd discounted Christianity until I finally had this moment of epiphany where I realized every world religion tells you what you need to do to get to God. But Jesus was the only one who told you what God did to get to you. And so I thought, all right, this is not consistent to every religious narrative in the world. This is the one inconsistent narrative. So it might be the one that's true. And, I wish I could say I did massive research, but I didn't. I just basically said, God, if you're real, I want to know. And Jesus, if you're God, I'm going to just trust you. I'm going to give you my life. And in that moment for me, it was significant because if God saw me, I mattered. Like if God created me, my life had intention. It was not accidental or arbitrary. And so the moment I had that kind of epiphany, and it's like I woke up the next day and I really was a different person. And people talk about going from bad to good. That wasn't it for me. It was going from emptiness to meaning. Like it went from, I don't know why I'm here. I'm just sort of here for the beer. It's like, that kind of life. And then now going, oh, I'm created to actually make an impact on the world, to make the world better. I can solve big problems. Like someone could solve the problems of poverty or injustice or economic instability. Why not me? And so everything just shifted. It's almost like a turbine turned on inside of my soul and went, let's do something that matters and let's leave a mark in human history so that when you die, it mattered that you lived. And that was a turning point for me.
Yeah. Also that feeling of as you're explaining that you're meant to be here, you were, and maybe you lacked that feeling when you were growing up as well.
Oh yeah.
Do you think the reason your relationship, you've been with your wife for 42 years, do you think the reason that's been able to stay strong for so long, even though what you're explaining so much in this conversation is you guys are so different?
Oh, so different.
Do you think the reason it's been able to be strong is because you've got Christ at the center? Or what would you say is some advice on keeping and maintaining an amazing partnership?
I mean, I do think that, and I like the way you said that, we've stayed together because Christ is at the center, because I don't think I would have made it. And I don't think she would have made it because I wasn't easy to live with,
and she wasn't easy to live with.
I think to me, she's easier to live with than I am. I'm going to say that because this is going public.
just make sure you lock the doors and turn the lights off every night.
I think that my wife was an orphan, left starving when she was 8 years old in a government project, lived in a foster home from the age of 8 to 18, was never told, I love you one time, living on clothes from the Salvation Army, being rationed when she was allowed to use water, and was a child slave picking tobacco on a farm. She had the hardest life that a person probably in the United States could have. So I think that, yes, she has a lot of trauma and that made it hard. But it also made it easy for me because when I married Kim, I didn't marry Kim thinking, oh, she's going to meet all my needs. I can say if I've ever done anything that I'm really proud of, I married Kim because I felt it would be a privilege to love someone who never knew love. And so I never thought about leaving because she wasn't meeting my expectations, because my whole purpose for marrying her was to try to be an expression of unconditional love. And it's the reason I'll be with her till we die. because I think she deserves to be loved without condition. And with me, I was always such a ridiculous risk taker, and I probably jeopardized us so many times in our life that it took a lot for her to hold on and stay with me. And but after decades, she's really come to trust me. So I think Christ being at the center was huge. But I also think there's two things: there's trust and there's forgiveness. You can't hold on to a marriage if you don't forgive. And so if you decide to get married, you have to decide that your bank of forgiveness can never expire, because that person is going to need it the entire way through. Kim's had to forgive me 1,000,000 times. I've had to forgive Kim 1,000,000 times. And that's a part of it. And in the business space, this is the trust part. I had a company, was doing pretty well. In 2 years, it was, fairly solvent. And it was a fashion company and a film company and a tech company. And I had a partner who woke up one day and they stole everything. So I lost like $6 to $10 million in one day. And they wanted me to fly to New York to negotiate to fight for my company. They stole it to make me come and fight for it. And I said, I'm not going to fight you for it. You can have everything. And I flew home that next day, and I sat down with my wife having coffee that I could no longer afford. And I said, honey, I lost everything. And her immediate response to me, without blinking an eye, without hesitation, was, I thought I was your everything. I thought, who says that? No one says that except in a movie. And I didn't have a great romantic response. So I said, well, I lost my other everything that funds my everything. And then Kim looked at me and she said, we've been poor before. We slept on the floor because we couldn't afford a bed years before. She said, we've been poor before, and you've always found a way. We're poor now, and you will find a way. She never blinked an eye in trusting me that I would create a better future with her. And it's interesting, our kids were adults at that time. They're in their 20s. And they both came to me and said, Dad, that was the wrong partner for you. God's just freeing you up to create something even better, which we did. And so I think those are the two things that have really helped us: forgiveness and trust. And that's helped us sustain. And of course, for us, obviously, Jesus being at the center of that. Yeah.
I feel like that's what every man really wants.
Yeah.
Trust.
Yeah.
Because, like, that assurance of, I'm here for you and we've got this and it's a team, and having that trust in, I believe that what you believe is going to work. And if you believe it, then I believe it. And that trust. And if it doesn't, then that's okay. We're still here.
Yeah.
I feel like whenever I hear that, I just go, that's all I really want.
Yeah. And I know this may sound old school, but I genuinely think wives want to be adored. They want to know that you want her more than anyone. And men want to be respected.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy wants to know that you believe in me and that you believe in my talents, my ability. And so I know we live in a world where everything's supposed to be the same, but it's not the same, And when I look at Kim and she feels like she's the only one I want, it's like everything just lines up. And when she looks at me and goes, I just believe in you, I just respect the man you are, it just all lines up for me. And so I think it's a little different, but it's a part of the chemistry of it.
I can't agree more.
Yeah.
It's trying to blend us all into the same takes away the magic that we actually have.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not the same. And by doing that, you're stripping away actually what makes it great.
Yeah.
And perhaps that is a slight problem with the culture right now, and with the messaging and the way that a lot of things are going down, is it's steering away from that traditional thing because of progression. And I often wonder, is that actually helping? you know, and, you know, whenever I speak to people that have faith at the core and they're religious, you know, they do lean more towards that traditional view. And obviously, like, it makes sense because they're practicing what they preach. But I see that there's this underlying level of connection that they have that's a bit more, they radiate a greater energy. And I often wonder, you know, like, we spoke about this off air around the best way to communicate faith to increase the adoption of faith. Because there's so many ways of people communicating faith, and it just makes me repel faith more. And I don't want to repel faith, and I never do, but it certainly doesn't get me closer towards it when I hear people say things in certain ways. But when I see people like yourself, even just from the moment you've walked in, you've just got this like smiley, happy nature about you. It's like you're laughing at things. Like before we record, you go, you just don't know anything, and it's so great. The way you smiled and said it, it's so good. You're a pastor, and you have a chain of churches
called Mosaic. Yeah,
called Mosaic. What's your message that you share? And in more of a lens of like someone that maybe is an atheist, or someone that is, and I'm not atheist. I believe there's something there. I'm not religious, but this can't all be me. You know, I interviewed a surfer, Laird Hamilton, the other week, and he's like, people ask me all the time, like, how do you know God exists? And he's like, just look. It's like, look around. Like, look at everything. He's like, come on now. And I resonate with more of like that approach, and I hear that and I go like, yeah, that makes sense. But when someone comes over to me when I'm loving my life and they're like, you're going to go to hell, I don't resonate with that, and I don't connect with it. And you know, there's a common thing that I feel, and there's someone, probably the most researched person that I've ever spoken to about religion. He's read the Bible hundreds of times, and every religion, he just seems to know everything about everything. And he's like, the biggest thing, correct me if I'm wrong here, but he's like, the biggest thing Jesus hated was religion, because it came to separate people. He was like, it's Christians and us, Jews and us, Muslims and us. And I just look at people that radiate this infectious energy, and most of the time they have some sort of relationship to a God. So I don't want to dismiss that. But I know this is a long-winded way to say this, but what's your message to people that maybe are a little bit on the fence of where they sit, and what's your way of sharing the word?
I think most people think they've rejected God, but what they've actually rejected are people who believe in God, who handled it in a really offensive way. And so that's the first thing, is don't let people get in the way of God. And because unfortunately we humans are imperfect, and we bring all of our trauma and all of our mess into our message, you know. And I don't really ever I don't feel any need to try to force anyone to do anything. I don't feel the need to even try to convince people. I just think what people long for is to be fully alive. And I think my number one responsibility in life is to be fully alive, so that I can be proof of life, so that someone else might go, how did you find that? And so I feel like my responsibility is to be proof that Jesus is real. Not through argument, you know, not through even evidence, just through my essence and my personhood as a person. I started Mosaic because religion didn't fit me. And I wanted to create a space for people who are outliers, who are explorers and pioneers and entrepreneurs and inventors and creators, who did have a sense perhaps that something was still there that they couldn't understand. And so I think that, you know, I really am not like a person that would sit here and try to argue with you that Jesus is real. But I am a person who would say that I have experienced the reality of Jesus. And if that's something that you want to explore, then I would say I love having conversations with people about that, because I can't even believe this. I wrote a book called The Genius of Jesus, because I'm in my back house going, how is it possible that I believe in Jesus? I mean, literally having this conversation with myself going, I can't believe I actually believe in God. I can't believe I believe in Jesus. This is insane. On top of that, my whole life revolves around someone who lived 2,000 years ago. I'm in my back house having this kind of moment with myself. And then I said, what if he isn't real? My whole life revolves around someone then who wasn't real. And I go, yeah, but you can't deny that you've been changed by him. So that's real. I go, okay, so then if he isn't real and I've been changed by him, then I was changed by the idea of him, which then becomes the most powerful idea that has ever existed in human history. So I've either been changed by the reality of Jesus or the idea of Jesus. And that's how I end up writing this book going, all right, let's look at Jesus as an idea. and so what was Jesus's idea? And if it changed human history for 2,000 years, that would qualify as genius. So why isn't Jesus seen as a genius? And I've seen Muhammad on the list of geniuses and Buddha on the list of geniuses, but I've never seen Jesus. And the reason is because what Jesus accomplished can't be limited to human genius. Even people who simply study genius as an anthropological study know that what Jesus has impacted in human history can't be described as genius. It goes beyond that. And so for me, I'm like, I actually think all of creation, everything around us is screaming at us, telling us you're created for more. You're created for love. You're created with intention. And the way I understand Jesus is God is the name I use when I'm looking for him. But Jesus is the name when I finally realize he's looking for me. And, Chris, before I walked in, you were a name in my phone, but not someone I knew. But now there's texture to the name. And so now Chris means something different. I knew the name of Jesus, but it was like knowing the name of Chris. But then when I came into an encounter with Jesus, there's texture and reality to his name. And so I would just say there's really two clear options. Either nothing can be known and somehow we exist in this existential and meaningless moment, or God created us for a relationship with him. And that all of this is this incredible story in which God is trying to reveal himself to us. And every religion tells you this is what you need to do to get to God. Even Buddhism, this is what you need to do to get to enlightenment. This, Islam, this is what you need to get Allah's approval. Like even within Catholicism, these are things you got to do to get forgiveness and get to heaven. But that's not what Jesus taught. What Jesus actually said is everything you're doing is religion. And it's not going to get you there. It's a Tower of Babel. You're just never going to get to God. It's what God did to get to us. And that's the difference in the message of Jesus, that God stepped into human history on our behalf, that he took on flesh and blood because he wanted us to see him. He died on a cross so that through his death we could have life. And he rose from the dead so he could know that not death, not suffering, that nothing can actually conquer love. And that's, to me, is like, it's the greatest love story that's ever been written, that God has come for me. And so it's one of those things where I go, if this isn't true, it should be. And if it isn't real, then there is nothing that is real. And so I'm putting all of my, all the weight of my life in this truth, that Jesus has come for me, and that he's changed my life, and that he makes me fully human. And that's what he's inviting us into. And that's what I would say.
It's the best. I think it's this way of just showing up in that way.
Yeah.
Like if you were just a person that was negative the whole time you walked in here, and then you were rude and not polite, then you were telling me everything that you just said. Like, that's just a sack of shit, respectfully. But you showed up in that way, and I think the thing that draws people to it, and you hit the nail on the head, it's never a moment of like preach unless they ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of I'm just going to show up in the way that Jesus would want me to.
Yeah.
And people are going to feel so gravitated towards me they're going to be like, what is he doing differently? Like, how is he showing up in this way?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like if we think about, there's this spiritual approach of like everyone being connected to each other, and there's this energy that radiates through everyone. Do you resonate with those sorts of views? And do you feel like there's this element of us that we're all connected in some way, shape, or form through frequency and whatever you might call it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that would be one of the things that in some ways makes Mosaic different than a lot of established churches, is that, I think last year or a couple of years ago, I was doing a talk on particles and quantum entanglement, and how what you know scientifically is that when two particles interact and then separate, even if they go across the universe, those two particles are still interconnected. Which explains in many ways why how is it someone could come into your life when you're 5 years old, and then 23 years in the making, that person is still impacting your life? It's because there's a quantum entanglement. Your particles are still connected to that person. See, whether you like it or not, we're now in a quantum entanglement, you and I. I will never have an existence that isn't impacted by the particles of who you are, and you'll never have an existence a part of the particles of who I am. And so the entire universe is interconnected. It communicates with itself. The universe has a consciousness, but this is what I think sometimes we misunderstand. When people talk about, the universe has consciousness, the consciousness isn't out there. Humans are the consciousness of the universe. Only through humanity does the universe have a sense of self-awareness. Not even other species on this planet have a sense of self-awareness. We're the only ones. So we're like this optimal expression of creation, which is kind of cool.
So do you think if we're reacting negatively to a certain thing with someone, it's just telling us a bit about ourselves? Because if we're all connected in the sense of like this, we're all connected here. If you're looking at someone in a negative way, perhaps there's something about you that you don't fully love, and maybe it's coming out of you through them.
That can very much be true. When you have a negative reaction to someone, it can be one of two things. There is a resonance to someone else that they remind you of. Their resonance matches someone else's resonance, and so you go, a warning. Or there's a resonance to your darkness. And you go, oh, I know this is dark about me, and I see it in them. And so sometimes we're not even aware what we're rejecting is the darkness in us, which is actually very, very true. So it can be one or the other, but whether we like it or not, we are definitely all interconnected. And when you think about, even just like some of the dynamics of quantum mechanics, when you think about the fact that, there are things happening in South America that are impacting things in Europe that we're completely unaware of. That's also true on an interpersonal and human level, which I think is one of the reasons why prayer, it's funny when people mock saying things like thoughts and prayers, and yet they're the same people who later talk about manifestation and manifesting your thoughts. Like, thoughts actually have power. And prayers actually have power because we're all interconnected. It's part of the communication system of it all. And I have experimented in these worlds and have some, fun moments and stories. And I have hundreds of people have seen some of the experiences I've had where one time I was at this fair. There might have been 500 to 1,000 people around there. And there, I had one of those dunking booths, and everyone was hitting that dunking booth target, but it wouldn't go down. And they were missing it. Even when they hit it, it wouldn't go down. It was stuck. And so I was walking across the park. They saw me and said, hey, come and try the dunking booth. And so I was pretty far away. I took the ball and I went to throw it as hard as I could. And the target pushed back and the guy went down. And then I threw the ball up in my hand. I'd never let go of it. And hundreds of people saw me do that. And I've because I didn't grow up in a traditional faith and a traditional world, early on, I began really exploring the capacity of the human mind. I actually think humans are capable of far more than we could ever imagine. And so, you're not looking at someone who has a very traditional view of human capacity. I think our capacity is much larger, more significant than we know. In the same way, I think that when someone speaks into your life, they're shaping the universe inside of you. And when you speak in someone's life, you're actually shaping the universe inside of them. And that's why when someone tells you when you're young, you'll never make it, or you're nothing, or you have no talent, they're actually creating like a black hole inside of that universe. And so I know that our words have creative power inside of the universe, inside of each other, which is why I study human communication, because I want to speak life into people and expand the universe inside of them, who they can become. And so when people say, oh, we can manifest realities, I don't know if you can manifest the realities. I've tried that and it doesn't always work. But what I do know is I can manifest a reality inside of someone. Because when you bring hope into someone, it changes them. And just this past weekend, a mom came up to me that I did not know. She wanted to tell me a story. And at first I didn't feel like I had time, but I just called her back and said, tell me your story. And she said, our son died. And when he died and we were pulling all those things together, we pulled up his computer and all he had been listening to were talks that you'd given. And we understood why our son had so much hope at the end of his life. And here I am, I'm so grateful I took a moment to hear this, right? I'm speaking words that are going across the airwaves. It exists in an invisible reality. And I don't even know if some kid is struggling to die of some disease. And he's listening to my words and it's giving him hope, even when others would call his life hopeless. I think we should never underestimate the power of our words, the power of your podcast, the power of your voice, which is why it's so important to help people who have a healthy inner world learn how to find their voice and to master their message and to understand the impact they can make on other people.
Thing that's coming to my mind, and we don't need to go here, but perhaps that's a massive reason as to why so many of us got so affected with what happened with Charlie Kirk, because of how powerful his words were and they spoke people's realities. And, it can't just be people on this. We've got to be connected when you can see what happened and you're moved physically, emotionally, and every way, shape, or form just by witnessing something. And him specifically, because of how powerful he was and how much he spoke to people. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how much I was moved by what happened in a shocking negative way.
Yeah.
And as you're explaining this, it's this feeling of his words had so much power.
So much power that someone had to silence it. And that's when we come to a realization that our words have power. Our voices are our greatest weapon. But it wasn't just that Charlie could communicate, it was that he could think and that he put the work in to be able to articulate his message. And, sometimes it could be acerbic or, almost to use his words in a way that he knew he was creating a sense of controversy. But when you're fighting in the world of ideas, sometimes you have to push things to the extreme to help people see the conclusions of their thinking, which is kind of interesting because it's exactly what I did for 40 years. When people would argue with me, I would just go, let's take your idea and let's see how it plays out completely. And that's how you can know when an idea is bad. It's even with careers. I'll have CEOs tell me, I don't know why, but I feel log jammed. I have this opportunity to expand my company or to get a promotion or do this. And I go, okay, imagine your life if you succeeded 100%. And they go, okay, do you want that life? And almost always they go, no. And I said, that's why you have a ceiling. You're actually stopping yourself from creating a life you don't want, but you're pretending it's this obstacle that's stopping you. It's the same way with the truth. Like when someone says to me, and I don't want to be overly political, but when they, I'm from El Salvador, so we have a very different perspective of the world. When someone says to me, I'm a socialist, I go, okay, let's play this out to see what it looks like. And every time you get to the final outcome, everyone's like, well, no, I don't want that. Or, you know, I'm a Muslim, like, and I'm going into the Middle East this week, you know, and play out what the world looks like if Sharia law is over all of the earth. Like, and no, I don't want that. Okay, let's take capitalism, as messed up as it is, or democracy, or whatever you want to call it, meritocracy. Let's take those three concepts and play those out across the board. And so a lot of it is you have to be able to look at the 100% success of an idea gives you the best view of what you're actually advocating for. And so a lot of times what Charlie would do that would upset people is that he would take a bad idea and push it to his extreme. And then people go, oh, you're a racist, or you're this or that. But what he was really doing was showing where that line of thinking would actually take you. I don't believe for a second Charlie Kirk would see a black man as a pilot on a plane and think, oh no, I'm in trouble. I think what he was saying was, if you take the ideology of DEI and allow it to go to its full expression, you'd have to be worried. And so a lot of his arguments were using that particular approach. And that's why a lot of people will clip that and go, you see, he's this. And I go, no, what he was actually doing is saying, your ideology left unchecked would create this kind of world. And by the way, that's actually how I became a person of faith in many ways, going, if the teachings of Jesus could actually be 100% successful, would I want that kind of world? And I go, oh, that world would be, paradise or heaven. And so it compels me to follow Jesus because it's the best outcome when you look at the outcome at 100% success.
That's probably the best explanation I've heard of that. It's too short-sighted when people are hating on a certain view. They get offended by something the person didn't even really say as well. Like the intention of what the person delivering the message isn't actually what they're perceiving it to be. Mm-hmm. That's because the person perceiving it is being quite maybe potentially short-sighted with the view and not actually unpacking it. And even just the way that you're saying, just pan that out, see how it goes. Like if everyone adopted that, what would life look like? And is that a life that you want? Mm-hmm. And perhaps a lot of the opinions and views that a lot of people have, they're not actually seeing that out. And there's definitely views in my life I probably have that I'm not seeing out. And it's definitely things that I don't agree with that maybe I have seen out and gone, no, that's not something that works. But applying everything through that filter is a pretty profound thing. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, it's been so much fun. It's so good to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And I'll leave all of your details in the show notes description below. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Conversations are the best way to move life forward. And so that's why I'm so happy to be here with you. And if people want to know more, they can go to my website, erwinmcmanus.com, and pick up the 7 frequencies. And if you're into art and style and culture, check out Ghost Artifacts and join us there. I actually think that a huge part of what drives me, because you say you're a curious educator, is that I think I'm an explorer, and I love exploring all the questions of the human experience. And then behind that, I think I'm a creator. I love creating, because when you create, you inspire someone else to create. And imagine what would happen if all of us were convinced we create. Because, we had someone break into our house, a couple of guys, just a couple of weeks ago. And I always say, look, we steal because we do not believe we can create. If we could actually create a movement where all of us began creating and using our gifts and talents and potential to do all the good we can, we would never steal again because we'd never need to. And so ironically, we can create a better world by pulling the best out of every person.
We're going to sign out there. Thank you so much, Erwin.
Hey, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.